Yeah. So the good with it is just the ability to start, in a way, blending thought processes into a holistic approach. We know that it's not just the siloed approach is antiquated. And that's what we see so much of in strength and conditioning is that strength and conditioning is siloed from practices, from the skill development, from the technical and the tactical aspects, from the sports medicine, and they're all siloed. And so that's one area that I've really tried to have a big influence on with our younger coaches, especially, is that we need to blend all these pieces together. You need to be going to your sport coaches and seeing what's happening in practice. You need to be going to practice. You need to be looking at workloads. We need to try to get GPS with these energy system dependent sports so that you know what's going on in practices. It's blending all of these pieces so that we can create ultimate athletic performance and hopefully injury reduction, health in our athletes. That's really what it's all about. That's the good. The bad is being on the administrative side is not all it's cracked up to be. It is meetings. It is a lot of headaches that you didn't realize that you had. And so I am so much less of a coach now than I was previously. That's what people don't understand is, to be honest, I'm not a strength coach anymore a lot of days. You take off that hat because you have so many other roles. Your time is extremely, what the word is here, obviously valuable, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's under demand at all times because there's always somebody walking through that door that says, hey, I've got a problem. A coach walking in the door says, hey, I've got a problem with this staff member. It's always something. Just walking out of the building in the evenings to go to my car, you get stopped by 2, 3, 4 people. And before you know it, my wife is yelling at me because I told her I was leaving 35 minutes ago. And she's like, where in the F are you? I got stopped 3 times on the way to the parking lot with issues. And so you are less of a coach than you ever dreamed of. A lot of times I find myself, this is where it's been the most difficult, is time management. A lot of times I find myself having to write my programs with baseball at midnight at home because I don't have time during the day to do that stuff, to do that work, because it's meetings. It's, like I said, the pop in, somebody randomly coming in the office, a phone call. We've got this problem. And now you've got to figure these situations out while you're on campus. And yeah, so a lot of times I'm taking my work home with me. And to me, I shouldn't do that. I have to manage my time better. And that's one of the things that I've had to clean up in the last couple months.
Switching gears a little bit into the actual X's and O's of baseball. One of the things I think most people know you for is how prominent max velocity work is with your baseball team. If you don't mind just diving into a little bit of that and how you've been able to evolve it in your time there.
Yeah, so started out as a young strength coach. I believed all the things that were prominent 20 years ago, that you don't do max speed work because you're going to hurt the athletes, you're going to have a hamstring issue. These were things that I was taught as a young strength coach, and how that's evolved is just realizing and understanding that you have to inoculate them against that. And so the principles for us are going to be fast, fresh, and frequent. We want to run fast when we're training speed. I want that Charlie Francis 95% plus as far as our intent or our intensities. Fresh, we want our guys to feel good every time that they go out to try to run fast. And a plan B is always better than the plan A of getting hurt, right? So if they've got hamstring issues, if they've got anything going on, I tell them, you have to communicate that to me. Before we ever run a rep full speed, I tell them, you need to let us know how you're feeling. If you don't feel up to it, I want you to stay a half step to 1 step under, which is what we consider our 90 to 95% zone. So we'll say a half step to 1 step underneath. Max intent, we're still going to get some good work out of it. But there is an exponential difference between 85% sprints and 100% sprints in intent. We had a Zoom this was last semester or 2 semesters ago with Dr. Heiderscheit from the University of Wisconsin. And he is the lead researcher for hamstring injuries in the NFL. And so they've done research on the difference in sprinting between, I think it was 85 or 90%, and what a max effort 100% sprint was on, I think it was motor unit activation or whatever it was, EMG readings possibly. And there was just an exponential difference in that small little gap. And so if we've got guys that are having issues, we say 90 to 95%, that half step to 1 step underneath full intent, we'll still get good work in. So it's communicating with the athletes on that fresh. And then frequency, we want to touch max speed every week, essentially. So I tell the athletes this all the time, that frequency is the most important thing. Baseball is a real challenge because the athletes go home for 5 weeks before they start the first day of practice, essentially. And so they have to stay on their stuff. That's why you see so many injuries in spring training and preseason baseball. That's when all the injuries stack up, is because they've been on their own for the previous 4 or 5 weeks. And if they haven't been doing their stuff with intent that we want, matching the demands of the sport, you're going to come in and you're going to break in those first 4 weeks of practices. So that frequency has to be there. I tell them, I don't care if you lift in the weight room over Christmas break. I don't care. That's not what I need. I need you to be hitting the volumes, the intensities, and the densities that we're gonna see on field in practice, so that you're matching the demands. But the barbell isn't out on the field. I don't need you to match the squat demands of baseball. I need you to match the movement demands. And with that means we have to hit high speeds on a weekly basis.
For any of our baseball or even softball listeners out there, has there been, or excuse me, what was, if any, pushback you had from the coaches on being able to touch that quality? And then what would you advise to our listeners that are trying to work with their coaches and their high performance teams?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever really gotten any pushback. And part of that is because I continually educated our coaching staff from the moment I got into TCU and I took this job. I talked about this in the presentation at CVAPS. It's a continual education process in our staff meetings throughout the year. Really, if there's something I want to do, change, I'll notify those guys, but I'll educate them on why we're doing that. Even just on my interview process, I had a PowerPoint put together, and most coaches are doing something like this. I educated them on the standards that I have, all the principles of our programming and how we're going to operate. So they knew before they hired me what they were getting. The first day or the first week that I was on campus, I did that same thing again for the coaching staff and the players, because I wanted the players to understand exactly where I was coming from, all the principles that I believe in and how we are going to train. Speed and power are the first of those principles. That's what we're going to chase speed and power all day long with our athletes. And so I educated them from the first day. And we used to do that. I don't necessarily do it as much anymore with the athletes because it's a continual education process in the workout, the training session itself. But for the first 10 or 12 years, I would sit down with the athletes when they walked on campus that first few weeks, and we would go through that PowerPoint again. And I would tell them, here are the standards, the principles, everything, the expectations that I have for you in our training sessions, so that there was never any question, just to get everybody on board. So to me, it is a continual education process, because the only reason that coaching staffs wouldn't allow you to do speed work or anything else that should be happening in any competent training session is because they are uneducated about it. They're uneducated, right? And sometimes, yes, you're going to find coaching staffs that won't bend, and that's a tough situation. But to me, you can always overcome that with education. And there were times outside of speed development that I did have to educate and was beating your head against a wall all the time. But eventually it got through. I used to have our orthopedic surgeons come. In fact, we had our spine ortho come in, and he gave a talk to our coaching staff on pars fractures, because we would have a plethora of back injuries, right? And so I preach about this all the time. In the South, we see pars fractures all the time. So pars fractures, for the listeners out there, are basically a stress fracture in the lumbar spine from overextension and rotation. They are the most common teenage injury, especially in males, that you're going to see across the board. Happens in the South a ton because warm weather, we are playing all the time. You don't really see it much in the North. So we had the spine ortho come in and give a talk to our coaching staff on pars fractures, how they come about, why they are not the fault of the weight room, and just educate our staff about why they are prevalent in baseball and what's going on. And so it was a chance to educate. And coming out of that meeting, our head coach had a better understanding, because I could talk to him all day long about why the weight room is not creating these pars fractures. It's the 1 hour, 3 times a week in the weight room is not the problem, versus these high school kids who are playing baseball for 5 hours a day, taking swings in a cage with 2 different coaches, a lessons coach on the side as well. And then they're doing this for 20 hours a week. The weight room isn't the problem. And so I needed somebody else to get that message across. And so we've done things with our orthopedic surgeons to help get that message.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.